Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, he says, making sure everything's still working. Oh, my goodness, that was a bit of a problem. Poor old computer has been fiddling and farting with a number of issues, and I've had to change a few things round, and I don't have any space left. I've just got a massive, great big desk on here. You can't see it at the moment because I've put this banner down here. I don't know if there's how much leeway I've got with this lead. Hang on, let's see if I can show you. I now have this in the studio. This is a great big desk. It's a desk I've had for years, actually, but I've been doing some tests. I may have to get rid of it and get another desk because it's too big, really, which is why, ladies and gentlemen, just so you can see, I put that banner up to hide the mess. So apologies for the delay in getting going. It's just been a bit hectic here. There's wires and things everywhere, so I'm just hiding everything. But hopefully, can you hear me all right? Because I've been fiddling with the audio and stuff. Can you hear me okay? It looks like it's low. Hello, 1 2 3 1 2. Is that better? Wow, mission control. Yes, I know. Tell me about it. Sorry about a technical. Suddenly, OBS, the program that gets the camera to the internet, was just not working. We can hear your mother. Marvellous. Does it launch rockets? I wish it did. No, it just does audio. But we were having problems with the Vobe show yesterday, getting callers to hear and phone in and stuff. I don't know whether I've solved that, but I may have solved other issues so that when Julia is on the show during this whole lockdown thing. So now somewhere here's a book. Oh, yes. So welcome to Listen with Vobes. I'm Richard Vobes, and this is Children of the Archbishop, and we're going to be reading the next bit. Sound is okay in my tablet in the earphones, says Turbo Stream. Thank you very much, people, for coming along. I'm eating an apple, so can't hear anything, says Dudley Sawyer. Great. Well, you won't be able to hear the book then. That's the thing. Right. Let us crack on. We are on chapter 26. So let's see how this pans out. There's no space for me to put my elbows on this table, on this desk, because of the thing. So we'll just have to see how we go with this. And I forgot to get myself a glass of water. I've got the dregs of coffee in here. And then, of course, I couldn't connect. Anyway, we're 10 minutes late, so let's get on. Sorry about that. Chapter 26. As she rang off, Dame Eleanor realised how tired she was. And more than tired, played out completely, a kind of self-sorrow which had become rather more frequent of late, which had suddenly descended upon her, and all that she wanted to do was put her feet up and close her eyes. But on a day like this, it had been impossible. Not a single free moment until after dinner. That was the trouble. She was too busy. Too much going on. Too many things depending on her. She asked herself sometimes why she allowed things to get that way. Why hadn't she simply refused when she was asked to take on any more? And she... sorry. I can't explain it. And she asked herself, too, why she didn't struggle harder to break away now before it got any worse. Why didn't she resign? Leave those innumerable committees to find some other women to fool enough to kill herself on their behalf. What? Why didn't she? She had done her bit. No one could deny that. Why didn't she? Could anyone please tell her why? Sorry, that paragraph read so atrociously. I've got no space in the studio. I've got no space. I can't... Hang on a minute. If I move that forward, you can't see what I'm doing, but I'm just moving this desk a little bit more forward, just so I've got space to raise just so I can get comfortable. But I spent all morning doing this testing just to try and get the show going, and now This shows suffering. Anyway, where were we? As a matter of fact, she knew. She knew perfectly well. And it wasn't simply that she cared more than other people, had a keener sense of duty. No, no, no. It went deeper than that, much deeper. Somewhere, right at the back of her mind, she knew that even now, if she eased up for a single moment, she would begin thinking again about that precious son of hers. It wasn't easy to forget a son. On the day that he had sailed away forever, she had felt as though she, not the boy, had been the one who had gone voyaging into a world where England was halfway round his globe and the stars themselves were upside down. He'd been such a handsome-looking boy too. Handsome but weak. There had been something about the way one lock of his hair fell across his forehead while he was talking. He was always tossing it back, only to have it come forward again, and that made it impossible to deny him anything. And apparently it had been impossible for other women too. But this was the very thing that had set her mind against. This dwelling in the past was one weakness she had taught herself to fight. That was why she was so grateful for Margaret. Margaret made her forget about all of that. The woman understood. She was devoted. It was obvious, in fact, that apart from the hospital, she had no other serious interest in her whole life. She simply lived for Dame Eleanor, treating her in a way which, in large families, the best kind of unmarried daughters look after their mothers. Dame Eleanor would not have minded, would rather have liked it, in fact, if Margaret had been her daughter. And now that Margaret was dressed properly, she certainly looked quite respectable enough to be a daughter. Dame Eleanor had already definitely determined to increase Margaret's bequest in her will. 150, she had decided, would be about the right sum. There was no point in showering money on servants, especially servants like Margaret, who had shown that they were a spendthrift with their money. Something substantial, however, was called for. She owed it to the girl. As the car drew up at the front porch, she was even wondering whether she should bequest 200. So I'm just going to move my chair up a bit. It's just, I feel like I'm sitting on the floor. Oh, there we go. That's a bit better, isn't it? My head is now in a more appropriate place. One of these days I'm going to move this into another place so I can put my feet up and read. It'll be so much easier. This desk is just in the way. Gosh. Because of Margaret's deceitfulness, her unforeseen and unimaginable disloyalty, Dame Eleanor saw nothing for it but to dismiss her altogether. What? She suddenly changed her tune. Altogether and immediately. What? This is really weird. This is the next paragraph. And 1 minute she's about thinking of giving her 200. Oh, sorry, I've skipped a very small paragraph. Oh, what will you make of me? So hang on. Yeah, so sorry, we'll come back to that. Can we start again, please? Can we scrub that out? Start again. Pretend this never happened. So, the last thing was she was wondering whether the bequest should not be 200. Then I skipped a paragraph, which is why I thought that's a bit odd. She could tell there was something wrong as soon as she entered the house. So I've just gone back. It seemed afterwards that she'd known all the time that Margaret would not be there. Dame Eleanor was prepared for it, yes, positively prepared, when the housekeeper came towards her bringing an envelope in Margaret's handwriting. But even then Dame Eleanor did not waver. She simply put the unopened envelope into her hand, along with all the other papers and things, and said sharply, "Hurry up the dinner, please. I have to go out again." Because of Margaret's deceitfulness, her unforeseen and unimaginable disloyalty, Dame Edna saw nothing in it but to dismiss her altogether. I'm very confused. She's so grateful. She's just talked about her being a daughter. I don't understand. Have we said something in here that I've read the book, for goodness sake. I can't remember what goes on here. It's very odd. I'm lost now. I'm lost. She was just about to give her £200. I don't understand. Oh, I wish I could get this in focus as well. Nor did that. Right. Okay. Let me just. Sorry, I'll just read this. I'll read this chapter again. Because Margaret's deceitfulness and her unforeseen and unimaginable disloyalty, Dame Edna saw nothing for it but to dismiss her altogether and immediately, nor did the awkward and rather halting sort of letter that Margaret had left for her do anything to make her change her mind. I feel awful having to go like this, the letter ran in the clumsy housemaidish handwriting, but another of the children is ill, and with Mrs. Gurnett gone, there is no one to look after her. I'm very sorry, and the moment she's better, I do want to come back, and... ... But Dame Edna only shook her head. She had liked Margaret, had raised her from the kitchen, had lavished gifts on her. The very shoes that Margaret had on her feet at the moment were a pair that Dame Eleanor had worn only once because the instep was too high, and had been fully prepared to do a great deal more than merely pass on second-hand footwear. But the foolish girl had, so to speak, decided to fling her gifts in her face and go off blindly with this self-invented mission of mercy. Well, if that's what she wanted to do, Dame Edna would say no more. She wasn't her keeper, and Margaret would very soon learn which side her bread was buttered. It would take just about a week, Dame Eleanor reckoned, for Margaret to discover that the staff quarters of Archbishop Bodkin Hospital weren't quite so agreeable as one of the guest rooms at the Cedars. And if Margaret seriously imagined that she could whisk back to the Cedars as soon as she got tired from a lot of children being sick, overall, she was very much mistaken. Because Dame Eleanor intended never to have her in the house again. Margaret was too busy to worry about her future with Dame Eleanor. She was too busy to worry about herself, too busy to worry about anyone except Sweetie. Sweetie had certainly got the disease all right, and more than merely got it, she was now a classic case. It was as though she'd been reading up on the symptoms and was now practising them. Dr. Arlett was at her side constantly. Nurse Stedge, who was fond of Sweetie, nearly broke down from sheer misery and anxiety and loss of sleep. It seemed unfair somehow that it should have come now, and that she would have to come face to face with this crisis alone, and desperately short-staffed. Haven't we heard all of this before? It's very, very reminiscent of local news. From sheer nervous exhaustion, and she had been a little bit of a jitter ever since poor Eleanor's death, she went sick herself. Nothing serious, as it turned out, just a sore throat and a temperature, a touch of summer laryngitis, perhaps. But it was near enough to the other thing to scare everybody, and Nurse Stedge included. And it left Margaret in practically sole charge. Between Friday and Monday, Margaret got less than 12 hours of uninterrupted sleep. And it was a revelation. She had never loved anything so much before. She felt as though she'd been waiting all her life for that moment. Everything about it was perfect, and she felt that she would remember it always. The way she smoothed back the hair from Sweetie's forehead, the smallness and hotness of the little hand that held hers, the last exquisite moments when Sweetie fell asleep, still with Margaret's arm under her, and the kisses that she'd given her, gentle bedtime kisses of the kind that would have been impossible by day with other children looking on. The memory of it would not leave her. Nothing that she had ever known before had been so complete and satisfying. It ought to be like this always, she kept saying. I can't ever leave her again. She belongs to me. Gosh, there we go. Sorry, I got back in the swing of it now. Chapter 27. Chapter 27. Ginger was fed up. Not about anything in particular. He hadn't been caned lately or had got into any fresh kind of trouble. He was just fed up with everything, and he was planning to run away. He had considered such a course before, had considered it carefully in all its detail, and in the end he had broken the problem down into its three essential elements. First, he had no money. Then he needed clothes, and finally he must decide on somewhere to go. All 3 points presented difficulties. The half-crown that Canon Mallow had given him was more money than he'd ever had before, but Dr. Trump had stolen it from him. All that he had now was threepence halfpenny, and it had been acquired with pain and perseverance over the preceding 6 months. But threepence halfpenny wasn't very much. He supposed that it was enough for him to go by bus somewhere. Buses, however, were not what Ginger wanted. He wanted to put a length of shining railway track between him and the Archbishop Bodkin Hospital, preferably a length of shining railway track with a waiting boat at the far end of it. Then there was the question of clothes. Suppose they started looking for him. They would find him at once if he had on the Archbishop Bodkin uniform. But here Ginger had his own private reserve again. There was a pair of flannel trousers, rather large, that had got left behind when some of the builders had been there, and then a blue woolly jersey had been circulating mysteriously around the hospital for years. But when it came to choice of destination, Ginger was frankly beaten. The only places in London that he could remember were Whitehall and Paddington Station, St. Paul's Cathedral and Buckingham Palace, and he could not imagine that he could not imagine what he could do in any one of them. Apart from them, the only other place he'd ever heard of was Bombay, but that was out of the question. That was in South America somewhere. All the same, it gave him an idea. Suppose he didn't run away entirely. Suppose he just made 1 or 2 little trips outside the grounds so that he could find his way about, discover at which end of Whitehall, St. Paul's and Paddington Station Discover at which end of Whitehall, St. Paul's and Paddington Station happened to lie. Oh, I see. Establish where the big boats really sailed from and all that sort of thing. And, thanks to Dr. Trump, the hospital was no longer the prison that it had been. The new fire escapes had changed the whole architecture of the place. As they were being erected, Ginger had studied them carefully and appreciatively. There was one fire escape in particular that seemed to offer almost limitless opportunities. Starting on the landing just outside his dormitory, it zigzagged down onto the leads below, a mere 12 feet or so from the pavement of Rycroft Gardens, just where they led into St. Mark's Avenue. The 12 feet itself was nothing for a boy of Ginger's side. It wouldn't hurt very much if he fell, but Mr. Trump hadn't let things go at that. He had apparently deliberately made matters even easier still, for the fire escape in rudimentary form had been extended downwards by means of 3 steel rungs let into the stonework. From the bottom of these, Ginger reckoned his feet would be pretty much touching the ground. Admittedly, getting back wasn't going to be so easy, but he supposed he could manage it somehow. He could leave a piece of rope dangling down, if he could get a piece of rope, that was, or he could give Spud a whistle and get him to come down the fire escape himself and haul him in. Something or other would turn up, he was sure of that. The important thing was to get out. Even for a short jaunt, a mere half-an-hour outing, however, it took a bit of planning, and if Spud were to play a part in the reserve rescue, obviously he would have to be told date, time, route, alarm signal and everything. Because it was so important, Ginger took considerable trouble about Spud's conditioning. He began by giving him a piece of coconut toffee that he had been hoarding for weeks. Wrapped in its original paper as it was, the toffee was still misleading, and that was because Ginger had removed it twice and started to lick it before some sixth sense told him that he might need it in the future. In consequence, it had had a bend and a worn sort of look, but it was still recognisably coconut toffee with straight shreds from the tropics imprisoned under the creamy amber. As Spud sucked, Ginger unfolded his plan, and at the end of it, Ginger made Spud swear an oath. And as it proceeded, it got better. Indeed, by the end, it was on the top level of oaths. Memorable, I don't know what that is. Impressive, indefinitely. Is that immovable? Maybe he means immovable. Immovable, impressive, definitely binding. And if I tell anyone, Ginger was saying, ever tell anyone, Spud repeated after him, I hereby give my friend Ginger full permission, to cut my throat from ear to ear. To cut my throat from ear to ear. And stab me heart in. So that was that. And everything was ready for Ginger's little Sally. Tuesday was the night set for Ginger's experiment. Tuesday at 2:20 hours. And by the time the moment of departure came, the whole dormitory knew about it. This was not Spud's fault, however, as much as Ginger's, and that was because on the third streak of the actor, and that was because of the thick streak of the actor in Ginger's nature. It was one thing to pull on a blue jersey and a pair of dirty flannels that nobody knew anything about. That was good. There was the authentic charm of a midnight plot and secrecy about it. But what was 10 times as good was to get ready in full view of everyone so that curiosity was aroused to fever pitch and then dismiss the whole affair as though it was nothing. You shut up, he said one by one to the other boys as they questioned him. You keep your nose out of other people's business. It was the ability to be able to say that, to feel the aura of mystery growing and expanding around him, that added the real flavour, the exquisiteness of his adventure. Moreover, there was just even an extra spice for Ginger, which had not been prepared, for just as he clambered over the parapet, he happened to look up at the dormitory. There were 4 windows in it, and at every one of the windows were faces, white, smudgy, goggle-eyed, admiring faces. It was indeed the excitement of seeing them that made him lose his grip, and viewed from above, as Spud saw it, the effect was distinctly dramatic. At one moment he was there, suspended over space, and at the next he disappeared. Only the slight squeaky thump of Jim's shoes on hard pavement indicated that he had landed and not simply vanished. Then, on soft padding feet, he set off down Rycroft Gardens towards the High Street. There weren't many people in Rycroft Gardens at the time, but even so he was careful. Running was conspicuous as it drew attention to you, and if people became too curious, they might run after you. So now that he was out of the direct view of the hospital windows, he sauntered. Putting his hands in his trouser pockets, he strolled along as though he were taking a late evening breather before returning to bed. After the gas lamps of Rycroft Gardens, with their incandescent mantles bubbling away inside their small glass boxes, it was like stepping into a beam... Have I missed something? After the gas lamps of Rycroft Gardens, with their incandescent mantles bubbling away inside their small glass boxes, it was like stepping into the beam of a searchlight to reach the high street. There was light everywhere, a sort of hard, brilliant daytime. And the shops, Ginger stood entranced before them. One of them had nothing but ladies' hats in it, dozens and dozens of ladies' hats, each one stuck up on a thin coronium stalk. And the shop next door was even better. It was ablaze with cheap jewellery, rings, brooches, bangles and watches, all glittering and shining there. Ginger spent some time looking at that. He even held out his own wrist to see how one of the men's watches would appear on it. He would like to have spent more time looking at the watches, but there was a policeman on the corner, and the last thing Ginger wanted was for the policeman to begin getting interested in him. So, with a final wink from the diamond engagement rings, he left Aladdin's cave behind and went full on past the grocer's that made him hungry, with its windows full of biscuits and pots of jam and tins of cocoa, past a men's tailor with nothing but lengths of cloth showing, very dull, past a chemist with toothbrushes and combs and feeding cups and bath sponges, mildly interesting, until he came to a public house. There was something special about this because it was still open. Night-time, but still open. It hadn't got a window exactly, just a big sheet of frosted glass. But there were designs cut in the glass, flowers and bunches of grapes and true lovers' knots. And there were the shadows of people's heads inside. There must have been some kind of ledge inside the window, because Ginger could see the shadows of glasses as well, a whole row of them. The best thing of all was the music. Inside, someone was playing a piano, playing it very fast, faster than Ginger had ever heard a piano played before, and louder. Whereas, whenever the door, which was also made of glass, with the same design of flowers and grapes and love knots, was swung open, the noise of the piano burst all over him like a silver and gilt waterfall. And with the music came another sound as well, a roar of voices, as though everyone inside was shouting at the top of his voice, not quarrelling, just shouting. And above the shouts, the sharp clink of glass and the rattle of the cash register. Altogether, it was easily the noisiest place Ginger had ever found, and the jolliest. The words, "Time, gentlemen, please," came to him suddenly, through the tantalising swing doors, and at the same instant the little clusters and festoons of lights were extinguished. People poured past him as he stood in the passageway under the "No betting, no children admitted, no drinking on the footpath" notices. There was a finality to the whole incident that left Ginger saddened at the loss. The curtain had come down and the magic was no longer there. Then a remark dropped casually over the shoulder disturbed him. He was standing doing nothing in particular when he saw a woman nudge her companion as she was going out with him. Just look at the clothes that boy is wearing," she said. "He might be an orphan." An orphan? This set Ginger's nerves tingling. It was everything that he wanted to avoid. He was conspicuous again. So he decided that it was time to be moving on, and quickly, too. Determined to put as much distance as possible between himself and the women, he crossed the road onto the railway station, and then a stroke of sheer genius came to him. Going over to the paper stand outside, he bought an Evening Standard. Admittedly, it was expensive, but when he paid for it, he had got twopenny halfpenny left. But it should have allayed all suspicion. The one thing orphans don't do is buy the evening papers. If Mr. Dawlish had been more thorough in his invigilation, he might have come across upon an unusual group in the lavatory break the next morning. At the far end of the water closet, 5 boys were assembled, with Ginger in their centre. He had a copy of last night's Evening Standard in his hands, and the other boys were looking admiringly from it to him and back to the newspaper again. Then the bell sounded. Ginger folded up the paper and restored it to his pocket. "Give it you for 1/2 when I've finished," he volunteered. "I can get another one whenever I want." And we are now on chapter 28. How are we doing? Are we doing it? Pride Before a Fall. Is Little Sally a new character? Little Sally? I don't think Sally's in there. Is there? Did I say Sally? I don't think I meant to say Sally. Oh, excuse me. The strain of being Mrs. Gordon had proved too much for Desiree. Ever since the evening when she'd sat in the front room of number 23A, Deirdre Gardens, talking to Miss Lewis, while Mr. Pavarius had been pretending to go to King's Cross, she had been less forthcoming. All that he was allowed nowadays was to see her at home. All that he was allowed nowadays was to see her at home, and it was because of the unforthcomingness, almost in fact of the holding backness of Desiree, that Mr. Pavarius took his bold and purposeful step. He put his affairs, his personal and heart-rendering affairs, into the hands of the Marriage Bureau. Not that he proceeded rashly and unguardedly. Indeed, from the moment when the idea had first occurred to him, he took every possible precaution. For a start, he selected his Marriage Bureau carefully, with circumspection. This, as it turned out, had been a longer process than he had expected, simply because once he had really got down to study of the subject, he found in London it was positively bristling with marriage bureaus. On the face of it, everyone else in London was at least as lonely and unwanted as he. Across the vast empty spaces of the human heart came their miscellaneous cries, their call signs, their throbbings. There were even entire newspapers, periodicals, monthly magazines devoted to this particular form of yearning. And Mr. Pavarius bought the whole lot. Dropping casually into a small newsagent's in Fulham that seemed to specialise in adult misery and its remedies, he emerged with a large sheaf of publications. Naturally, he turned to the Female Wants section first. And really it seemed as though his problems magically were at an end. There was no need even to compare the rival charms of prospective clients. The pages were full of optional fascinations. They were so orderly and well edited that a Maharaja could not confidently have ordered an entire column full. As for Mr. Pavarius, with his more modest needs, he might just as well pick his charm with a pin. A pin? The idea seemed quite excellent. To think, he said, reflecting, as he removed a pearl tie-pin from the black silk stocking that he was now affecting, that with one wave of the hand it is a human heart that is imprisoned. But which heart? What is it that guides the dart? An inch, half an inch, half an inch to left or right, and the true measure of distance is between misery and bliss. A fraction up and down, and it may be a harridan or a wool nymph who is chosen. Such indeed is life, with all its riches and glorious uncertainty. And smoothing out the paper upon his knee, he began to make circling movements with the fatal and decisive pin. Buzz, 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 he murmured half playfully as he kept the pin suspended in its gyrations over the eager awaiting columns. But there was, indeed, more than mere, but this was indeed more than mere playfulness. There was also an ecstasy of suspense. He went on like an airliner arrived too early at its airport. Then suddenly the note changed. He said as he desperately plunged the pearl tie-pin into fate. There! The buzzing sound had been so low that the Miss Lewises were not quite sure whether they could hear anything or not. They were merely aware of a faint, insidious vibration, as though in another room a bee had been trapped behind lace curtains. But the note changed suddenly. Ouch! Was the sound that reached them from the front bedsitter, as the pearl tie-pin, driven impetuously downwards, penetrated the folded sheets of newspaper and went into Mr. Bavarius's knee. Oh! The matrimonial paper itself had been trampled underfoot as he sprang from the chair in sudden pain, and when he came to examine the page, he could find nothing, not even a trace of a puncture. The lethal pin had been vertical in its descent and had been jerked back again too quickly to have left even the slightest mark. But Mr. Bavarius was not so easily defeated in the pursuit of love. He was both curious and resourceful, and as soon as he held the paper up to the lamp, he could see the tiny hole of light immediately. The only trouble was that the type from the other side showed through, and he might well have been reading gibberish. So carefully keeping the tips of his fingers over the pinpoint, he brought the paper back onto his knees again and began to read. Then he fairly bubbled over with excitement. His stroke, blind and unguided, had come down plumb in the centre, in the middle of a 4-line insertion that he might almost have inserted himself in the female companion wanted columns. Young lady, good figure, early 20s, genteel, attractive, natural blonde, it ran, musical and artistic tastes, fond of dancing and the theatre, but homely, wishes to meet refined gentlemen, ample means, age no object, similar tastes, view of matrimony. Ho, 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 it's hotting up, it's hotting up. Chapter 24 we have reached. Vobes hitting his stride now. Sally forth, says Michael White. Margaret had been in the hospital for nearly 3 months before Dr. Trump found a new matron to replace Mrs. Gurnett. But when he found her, she was perfect. The post had been advertised in all the right places, the Nursing Times, the Charitable Institution Gazette, the Homes and Settlements Record. But though there were plenty of other candidates, they were all passed over when Mrs. Britt appeared. Robust, reliable women who had nursed hundreds and whose first glance at a chest rash was worth a 3-guinea Harley Street consultation were turned down in favour of this highly qualified ice queen from North Staffordshire, who had been successfully assistant matron of the Home of Backward Girls in Stoke-on-Trent, a hostel for deficient children in Nottingham, a settlement for problem cases in Burnley, and lastly, a farm community for delinquents near King's Lynn. She was a tall, pale, chilly to the touch woman and silent. In her interview, she emphasised that she had 2 interests: providing proper school meals, here she held up one of her diplomas to prove it, and supervising the minds of the children that she was feeding. This was proved equally by her other diploma, and it was certainly obvious that she knew everything about children, everything that is, except how to set about having any of her own. But with so many cheerful millions all providing her with subjects, she seemed perfectly content with things as they were. It was Miss Britt's conviction that a properly balanced diet was the primary requirement of a truly happy childhood, and her first researches into the Archbishop Bodkin's meals appalled her. When she called for the diet sheets, there were none. For nearly 300 years, it appeared, successive matrons had simply been buying in enormous quantities of meat and vegetables and flour and lard and stuff and just cooking it. In consequence, the carbohydrates had won an easy, pernicious victory, and as for vitamins B and D, it was sheer good fortune if ever one went down the throat at all. But Miss Britt altered all that straight away. The odd arrangements of stew and rice pudding on Monday, liver and jam tart on Tuesdays, and so on throughout the week, was discarded. And in its place was substituted a modern meal as closely balanced as a hairspring and fairly reeking in all the vitamins. Raw vegetables was the basis of it, with raw fruit as well when in season. Cabbage, lettuce, carrots, potatoes, turnips, with plenty of cheese, all carefully shredded into digestible fragments and, with a little lemon squeezed over them, replaced the unhealthy slabs of meat and potfuls of boiled vegetables that had been served previously. Then, as soon as Miss Britt was assured that her charges were at last being properly fed, she turned her attention to the infirmary. And remember that she was no stranger to infirmaries. That was why she had spotted immediately that there was something strange about Margaret. Nor did it take Miss Britt long to discover what it was. The woman, in short, was an impostor. A well-meaning but totally unqualified impostor. The fact that she was well-meaning had nothing to do with it. Miss Britt was forced to point out this fact to Nurse Stedge, who obstinately kept on repeating that they couldn't get along without her. "We shall see," was all Miss Britt replied. "We shall see." And having said it, she decided that she would speak to Margaret herself. The interview between Margaret and her did not take very long because Miss Britt was so expert and so sure of herself. "Everyone tells me how good you are during the epidemic," she said, "and the last thing we want is to lose you. It's only that we can't afford to have unqualified nurses. Children are so precious, you see." "Oh, I know they are," Margaret replied. But Miss Britt had misunderstood her. Already she was speaking again in that high, senior, prefect voice of her. "I am sure you would," she said. "I don't really know you, but everyone's told me that I can rely on you." She paused. "And that's not all," she said. "The warden has spoke to Dame Eleanor, and she's quite prepared to have you back." "But I don't want to go back," Margaret told her. Miss Britt smiled. It was a faint sun in February, interviewish kind of smile. "I'm sure there are plenty of other posts open to you," she said. "From what Dame Eleanor's told the warden, in fact, and yes, that's what I said. From what Eleanor told the warden, she thinks most highly of you, and she'll be ready to give you an excellent reference. I'm sure the warden would too, if you were to ask him." Margaret stood there without speaking. Her eyes were fixed full on Miss Britt's smiling ones, but she herself was not smiling. She was still thinking of Sweetie, thinking a lot of things about Sweetie. "I want to stay here," she said. It was only then that Miss Britt's smile faded. "But as I explained, that's impossible," she said. "Our nurses must be qualified. They must have their diploma." As she came to diploma, her voice rose slightly. It was as though she was saluting the word, almost curtsying it. And it was obvious that she thought that she had brought the discussion to a close. But Margaret was not finished. She stood there unmoving, a tall, pale figure. She was noticeably pale than she had been when she had first come to Archbishop Bodkin's home. Those large, dark eyes had fixed on Mrs. Britt. If I get my diploma, could I stay? Margaret asked. Miss Britt smiled again. A genuine smile this time. The extreme silliness of the question had amused her. Diplomas aren't as easy to get as all that, you know, she said. Otherwise everyone would have one. Diplomas need study and application and hard work. Margaret leant forward. If I work hard, she asked, could I get my diploma? I mean, really hard. I don't mind how hard I work as long as I stay here. It was Miss Britt decided, not amusing any longer. It was pathetic. There was a streak of stupid obstinacy. Sorry. Rewind, start again. It was, Miss Britt decided, not amusing any longer. It was pathetic. There was a streak of stupid obstinacy in the woman that was like a peasant. And she remembered now that Margaret had once been a country girl. Evidently there were some things that she just couldn't understand. It's out of the question, Miss Britt told her. We can't have you until you're qualified, and even if you could, we're not a training college. There's no use thinking about it. You came here in an emergency. Now the emergency is over, well, there just isn't anything to stop for, is there? But the children, Margaret began. What about them? Well, they need me. This was really too much, and Miss Britt resented it. She snapped the top of her pen and screwed it up hard. It's not for you to worry about the children, she said sharply. They're my responsibility. And now, and here Miss Britt got up from her desk and went over to the door, I'm afraid I've got things to attend to. But still Margaret had not moved. She really was pathetic now, because she seemed to have no self-respect left to her. Isn't there anything else I could do? She asked. I don't mind what it is. Cleaning. Anything. I don't mind if I was just a ward maid. Miss Britt did not reply immediately. There was something so earnest about the woman that she didn't want to hurt her feelings. And then Miss Britt did one of those things that only those who have been used to authority can do. She went up to Margaret and laid her hand on her arm. Love of children is a very beautiful thing, she said. God intended women to love children, but there are other ways of doing God's work besides nursing. What you ought to do is get married. Get married, my dear, and have children of your own. And there we now have left book 3, and we are on book 4. On Forgiving a Sleeping Child, chapter 25. No, 30. Chapter 30, sorry. Brain went blank then. We'll leave that for tomorrow, ladies and gentlemen. Sorry, it took me a bit of a while to get going, but that's because I've been stressing and faffing with this damn studio. You want to see it again, don't you? You want to see all these knobs and twiddles and things and dials. Here we go. Look, all of that lot. Imagine trying to get to grips with all of that lot in the studio. Where are you? Look, there's that bald bloke talking to nobody. And I still haven't figured it all out. But hey-ho, there we are. I am lazy. Who said peanuts? His readings have been hypnotic today. Just like peanuts. Dear, oh dear, oh dear. Well, anyway, thank you very much for joining me. Sorry about the late start and the problems getting connected. But I'm hoping that I've sorted out a few issues. But although I've now got to work out where the hell I can put this desk so it's not in the way. But anyway, that's a problem. I feel like I'm too high now. There we are. Go down a bit. Oh, the A and H is back. What is A and H? What does that mean? The A and H. A and H? Oh, Alan and Heath. Right. Thank you. Took a moment there. Took a moment. Well done, Richard. You cope well. Thank you very much. The date for today is the 12th of the 12th. The 12th of the 12th, 21. What? 12th of the... What are you talking about? It's the 12th of January. 12th of the 1st, isn't it? 2021. 12th of the 12th. I don't know what you're on about. Anyway, lovely. I'm glad that we got that all sorted out. I will see you tomorrow. Have a good rest of the day and a nice evening, peaceful evening, without the old Voby, one-eyed Kenobi doing his thing. I will catch up with you. And no, 12th of the 1st. Yes, the 12th of the 1st, 21. Yes, that's right. It's a palindrome. Oh, good. I don't know what a palindrome is. Excuse my ignorance. I've no idea. Is that the numbers are the same at the beginning as the same at the end? Oh, yes. So 1, 2, 1, 2, 1. Oh, I see. So like, what word is a palindrome? There's a word, isn't there? Well, probably several words. Is it like noon? Is noon a palindrome? Palindrome, noon. That have the same letters at the end as, and it's a mirror of, I don't know, reads the same both ways. Yes, there you go. Yes, that makes sense. Brilliant. All right. Well, take care. Thank you very much. And I will catch up with you next time on another Listen with Vobes. All good fun. Now, how do I turn this off again? Oh, yeah. Bye.